Welcome to the Projector Podcast. I'm Jeremy Glowacki, Editor-in-Chief of Projector Central. On this week's episode, Sammie Prescott joins us from Colorado Springs, where he is a QA software engineer, ISF Level III professional calibrator, and most importantly, at least to me, a frequent projector and projection screen reviewer at Projector Central. When he's not working in clients' home theaters, Sammie spends his time researching AV equipment, testing various calibration methods, watching movies, and playing games. Today, we will discuss his most recent Projector Central review of the VisionMaster Pro 2 from AWOL's sister brand, Valerion. The VisionMaster Pro 2 has generated significant buzz and excitement in the projection market as one of the higher tier models in the Valerion lifestyle projector lineup. In his review, Sammie writes that Valerion has crafted an impressive unit that stands out by delivering a lot of performance at the appealing price of $2,999. The VisionMaster Pro offers 3000 ISO lumen brightness from its RGB triple laser light source, impressive contrast, dynamic tone mapping, excellent gaming performance, and more. Sammie notes that this outstanding price to performance ratio makes it easy to see why the Valerion VisionMaster Pro 2 has garnered so much enthusiasm. We will learn more about this stylish and robust new projector, but because this is his first podcast with Projector Central and only the second podcast we've done at all, I will want to get to know Sammie a little bit better as well. So, Sammie Prescott, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, it was great to see you too. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
How are things on this mid-March day in Colorado Springs?
Very windy. It snowed for about 2 or 3 hours, and now you wouldn't even know it.
Well, it's windy here too, which is weird because we're several states away. I'm in Indiana, you're in Colorado, and it feels like it's way too warm for this time of year. It makes me a little nervous, but we've got a weather thing coming in. So it's going to turn back into a little bit of winter before it gets back to spring, I think. So
yeah, most likely.
Well, I'm looking forward to getting to know you a little bit better. We've chatted on the phone. This is the first time I've been kind of connected virtually, visually with you. And before we start our deep dive on the projector, I wanted to ask you, how far back does your interest in tech go? Were you the kind of kid who liked to take stuff apart and put it back together, or was your techie side developed later on?
Yeah, I would say I was the kid that liked to take stuff apart and try to put it back together. Usually it wasn't successful, but I just always liked to know how things worked. That's always been kind of like the driving force, like, how does this work? And I've always had the question of what happens if I do this? What if? And that's kind of where it started.
Did you study any technical areas in school as you grew up, or how did you get kind of involved in it?
No. So I mean, when I was younger, my uncle, he used to work for Sony at the Rancho Bernardo plant in San Diego. And I was always into TVs, always into things like, DVD players and video games and just stuff like that. And I really would just buy something or look at something and try to figure out how it worked. And it just kind of progressed and got worse from there. So I didn't really go to school for anything like that. I mean, if I had a special, or what I would specialize in school would be something more along the lines of history versus like tech. But tech has just always been around me. So was easy to gravitate to. And then when I started finding more like-minded people, it's easier to discuss it with, and just learning. I just like to try to learn as much as I can.
Well, so your bio lists you as a QA software engineer. Explain how that is applied. Are you independent? Are you working for a specific company in your day job? Or?
I work for a specific company. Originally, when I started doing QA, because coming from loving video games so much when I was younger, I actually started out as a game tester.
Mm.
for Sony. So like if you probably look back to like super early PlayStation and PlayStation 2 games, my name will probably be in a good majority of the credits.
Wow.
So I was doing a lot of testing there, and then I started going into the technical standards portion of testing, which is more very specific white papers as to how something's supposed to work.
Okay.
And then I realized that working at that type of job killed my passion for gaming because
Oh,
it became just like work. So I left there, and then I started to do some like account management and light QA. But because I had so much experience in QA, I kind of just naturally transitioned and was more so pushed into QA roles.
mm,
So um, really just kind of developing test plans, test cases, figuring out how, again, how the system works, how to break it. So that question I always have of what if applies greatly there. And then I became also a certified Scrum Master for basically wrangling like a development team, working with product owners and developers to make sure that we follow the development methodology of Agile. So that's my actual profession.
and you have a side gig besides working with us at Projector Central and reviews is doing calibration on home theaters. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that actually started because that for some reason I always ended up with like DVDs of like Secrets of Home Theater or like
Right.
DVE, and I'd always try to kind of like tweak my TVs. And um, I was much younger, also it was a long time ago, but I had saved up, bought like this super nice plasma TV, and I couldn't really put my finger on it, but I knew it didn't really look right. And I went to a forum. It wasn't like AVS or anything like that, but it was just a regular other forum for like more so like gaming and movies. And someone had posted a picture, and you had the same TV, not really thinking, oh, I'm looking at a picture through a monitor through this. That wasn't even a concept to me at that point. But I messaged him and I was like, why does your TV look almost better than mine? And he said he got it ISF calibrated. And it's like, you got it what? And I had no idea what that was. So I called a calibrator, and he told me like how it worked and the cost. And then for every little thing I wanted to do, he started trying to like add on more and more and more. That's like, I'll just do it myself.
Mhm.
And I went and bought a meter, and I calibrated that one TV like probably 50 or 60 times, and found out that I liked it, saw that I was getting better at it. And then it started getting to the point where I would buy a TV just to calibrate it. Like,
Oh,
it's like,
geez.
oh, how does this work? I wonder how that calibrates. And I would just go out and buy a TV, calibrate it, and start realizing how things really truly worked, and understanding how the gear and the equipment works itself, finding the limitations, upgrading, and just kind of progressing through there. And I didn't actually get my certification until probably 4 or 5 years after,
Mm.
which was interesting because when you go in to get your certification, you have a few mix of people of they know nothing or they already know. In my case, everything they taught you, it's like, oh, I already know this. So it at least reinforced that I was doing something right. Um, and I continued to do it and continue to upgrade my gear, but I didn't start doing it professionally until probably around 2016, 2018-ish, maybe something like
Okay.
that. But I started actually learning to calibrate and calibrating like 2008 or so.
Okay.
And it got to the point where I had such a large investment in equipment that I was like, I should probably do something with this. So then I started doing some jobs and totally like scared to death the first few times because like I don't want to mess up this person's stuff. And yeah, I just kind of kept progressing. And I tend to be more the type of person where if I don't know how something works, I will go out and buy it on my own and just figure it out, calibrate it, test it, see how everything works, and then sell it, calibrate it. And at least then, because I basically look at it as an investment. So,
Okay. And are you, is it just word of mouth? Is it through forums? How do folks find you to get their projectors or TVs calibrated?
word of mouth, through forums, through email. I'm listed on the ISF dealer site. There's not, I don't want to say there's not a lot of us. There are a lot of people that calibrate that are enthusiasts or hobbyists that are great, that are better than even some professionals. Um, so there's a lot of us that do it, where since I do it professionally and I've had the benefit of working with a lot of different companies and on a lot of different brands, I've made a lot of good relationships throughout the industry. So there'll be times where, and I know a lot of dealers as well.
Yeah.
So someone might be looking for a calibration and they just send them to me, or sometimes other calibrators who might get a call from someone in another state that they're not planning on going to. They'll ask me, it's like, do you have any plans to go out here? And it's like, yeah, I might go out there, and I'll reach out to them and schedule a trip. So
okay, so you're not just sticking to your local market, you're getting out.
yeah, I travel from East Coast to West Coast, generally like a state, one given state at a time. I have done up to 3 states in like a little tour. I probably won't do that again, but usually it's like, okay, I might go to Texas and I might have a certain amount of people in Texas, and I'll go out there and do that. And then I'll come back and then do some local. And then I might go to, California, or I might go to South Carolina or wherever.
Well, I really enjoy learning about that. That's really cool. I didn't realize how widespread your business was there. But probably a lot of folks are chiming in here to find out about this Valerion projector. So let's get into that now.
Yeah, definitely.
On October 10th, Valerion actually launched their Kickstarter for this projector, and it became the highest funded projector in crowdfunding history, apparently. And the most funded project of the year, which kind of seems like that would go together. But this campaign introduced the VisionMaster line of projectors, allowing backers to choose from 5 models that Valerion was developing. They had a great setup there at CES, I saw, with all the different models, different price points, and early supporters had the opportunity to secure a unit before the official release. And once they got past their funding goal, the VisionMaster Pro was the first one out of the gate from an official shipping standpoint. And they have the Max flagship unit, which has not been released yet, still on Kickstarter, I believe. You reviewed the VisionMaster Pro, Sammy, after it left Kickstarter and began shipping. It's rare that I get to handle, I've only been on the job since January, but it's rare that I would get to handle a projector before the reviewers do. But they were aggressive with sending it to me. I just got the new job, was getting ready to head to CES. They're like, hey, I want you to see this. I want you to play with it before you get to CES and see sort of static units or whatever. So I had a chance to play with it. It was pretty unique in terms of industrial design right out of the box. I got to see its performance a bit, but don't have the experience that you do with handling so many different projectors and calibrating them. What was your initial feeling when you unboxed that, as far as the aesthetic of it?
So the aesthetic was interesting. It has like those kind of ridges go throughout the entire, not throughout the entire unit. They basically are almost serve as something, I want to say kind of like a brace. So if you look at it, it goes along the side into the unit, along the top, and on the other side as well. And it adds, based off of their documentation, it basically adds additional support. So like you could actually stack something on it and not worry about it, like say crushing it, for instance. I wasn't not a huge fan of the look of the aesthetic, mainly because it's kind of shiny, which you could easily just cover it with some like velvet or something. Um, it's catching to the eye when you look at it. Like it looks like a nice like industrial piece,
Hmm.
but like for where it will be positioned, like especially if you are doing like a tabletop installation, it's going to be kind of right there. And
Yeah.
I wasn't huge on the look. Um, the back cover, that seems kind of like an oversight.
Yeah, yeah,
That
you wrote about that. I was going to ask you that and further on, but let's get it now. You have to leave it open to be able to connect things to it. Like it sounds like
Yeah, and I mean it's not a big deal. It
just
really
the
isn't
power
a big
cord alone,
deal.
right? You put the power cord to connect with it, right? That
Yep.
has to be open for it.
Yeah. So like for instance, if you wanted to use this just as a streaming device, the unit by itself with nothing plugged in, just to even still give it power, you still have to open up the flap, leave it open, and plug it in. Again, not bad. You're not watching the back of the projector. I just think in terms of like aesthetics and looking a little cleaner, that it should either be able to be removed or just not be there, or at the very least have the power offset so it's not behind the door.
Yeah.
But again, like I said, you're not watching the back of the projector. It's just something that's like, that's weird. It's like that.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very interesting looking projector, and I think it's part of that, or it's in between a lifestyle and a more high performance projector in terms of price point, I guess. But you see those lifestyle, those little, lifestyle projectors that were all over CES, and they all have an aesthetic kind of quality to them, and
Yeah.
it's not like your original old, built to be projecting, not seeing kind of
Yeah.
projector. I don't know how to put that, but usually you want to hide a projector as much as possible, whether behind you or above you somewhere, kind of tucked away. But now that we're getting into more of a lifestyle experience, I guess that's a different, they want to have a look too. But I hear what you're saying. So what is your initial process when you get a projector? Is it the same for all of them? Is the first step after unboxing getting it sort of, powered up to get a factory reset? Is that your first step?
No, generally
Okay.
not. Usually after I unbox a projector, the very first thing I do is I just honestly just kind of look over the unit itself, see what the IO looks like, um, see like with the lens, if there's an iris, like what that might look like. Um, and then just kind of like looking at like the overall weight. So one of the first things I noticed with the Valerian is it's not that it's heavy, but it is somewhat heavier than other lifestyle projectors. So I noticed that, and then afterwards I kind of put that to the side and I go through all the accessories and see like what is actually available. Um, and then since I generally know what's coming in, what I'm going to be receiving, I already have an idea of where it needs to be set up. So then I just kind of start moving everything over to that given area. Um, then I power it on and I spend a decent amount of time just actually going through the menus. And I spend a good amount of time looking for things that I know are, I don't want to say a problem, but let's say a trait of certain types of projectors. So with a lot of lifestyle projectors, they might come from China and they will generally run Android, and a lot of them behave very similarly. So what I'll look at is just picking up the remote, changing things, see how it handles the smart menu. Does it get stuck or always stay in 2020, or is it always in HDR? How does it handle like those things? So I'll look at all of that stuff first. Then generally what I'll do is I'll factory reset it. Um, I will then look for a firmware update if there's one available and do the update on that. And then afterwards, I just basically repeat what I just did before. And I just make very high level tests. So for instance, I might go into, I'll hook up a source definitely, but I might go into the smart menu or the smart platform of the projector, make a bunch of changes to the settings, and then switch to HDMI to see if they carry over. And then I might say, okay, now I am back in the smart menu or the smart platform. I'm going to see if the controls actually work. So I'll just like ramp up green, for instance, like, okay, this works, this works. I don't know how well they work yet, but I know that they do function. So that's generally like the first things that I do once I get a projector.
So I know it's been a bit of time since you actually handled the projector. So I had, made sure that you took a look over your review. So when you get started with this Valerion projector, what are you seeing in terms of, you've got the Google TV operating system, which that enables you to get right to Netflix, right? You don't have to have a dongle. That's like the big thing with Google TV.
Correct. Well, that's not the thing with all Google TVs. So
Okay.
some implementations of it do not have an authorized Netflix. So when you go into there, if you don't see it like in the apps, because usually it would just be straight up in the apps and you can just select it right away. If it's not installed by default, what I do is I'll go into the like the menu where I'm looking at the information about the projector, and there'll actually be like a specific thing that says like Netflix, I think it's ESN, where it is basically authorized to access Netflix. So if that's not there, then I don't even worry about looking for Netflix because you can't access it.
Okay.
So yeah, I would generally start in the smart menu and just kind of work my way back. I don't spend a lot of time in the smart menu because generally most of them will work the same for the most part, but I spend a little bit of time just to see what's available and make sure that everything does work.
And but you're reviewing material from disc player. You do want to see streaming because a lot of folks are going to use that probably, right? So you may
Yeah,
not fool
so
around with the menu, but you want to have some content from that streaming.
right. So a lot of times the reason I don't use, and this is not all devices, and this is true for even like say for instance televisions. Um, a lot of times the built-in apps, they do not operate in 24 hertz and they might operate at 60 hertz, which most of them actually do. So I generally don't want to use the built-in ones if they're going to be operating at 60 hertz, because then I want to see like film motion, so like 24 hertz. I don't want to have it do any type of pull down and make judgments off of motion or performance based off of that, because most people will probably be using something like an Apple TV, a Fire Stick, Roku, and it will probably be doing frame rate matching, which will be putting whatever they're watching most likely in 24 hertz. So, but I do use a multitude of sources. I try to pair the source with the projector to make sense. Now, not to say someone that owns a Valerian may not be using a kaleidoscope, because many people could have like a Strato V and use a Valerian, and that's totally fine. But usually, in most cases, someone that has like a $2,000, $3,000 projector probably just not going to be running it on a kaleidoscope on it. They'll probably be using like a Blu-ray player, an Apple TV, a Roku. So I have like all of those. Like sometimes you might see that I use a Fire TV, an Apple TV, a Roku, a Blu-ray player, a kaleidoscope. I do use Arvolution a lot because it's an easy way to consolidate content, especially for stuff like 3D.
Okay. Yeah, and that's a 4K player. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it will play 4K. And you can, well, the one I have, you can also change the output resolution to 8K if you want.
Oh, okay.
But there's very few things that would support that, like
Sure.
maybe like a few different projectors, but not many.
What were your initial impressions of the video quality when you're starting your experience there with the Valerian?
It's actually really good. It's when you first see it, it's somewhat, I would say, somewhat striking because it is very impressive when you see it initially, just like a quick, not even first glance, but when you sit there and watch it for a little bit. It's when you sit there and watch it for a prolonged time, that's when you might start noticing different things. But for the most part, the image quality was good. Like it's one of the better performing, at least in terms of like accuracy and out of the box performance of almost any lifestyle projector that I tested.
Yeah, it was very noticeable to me. It was my first in my own theater, my first laser light source experience.
Mm-hmm.
I've since upgraded my own projector, but I had been on a lamp-based 1080p projector. This had one holds on to technology forever, and I
Right.
just had an opportunity to upgrade until I got this job, which thanks to Rob Saban was a quick process. But my predecessor hooked me up with something we already had in stock. So I get that laser just dynamic. I, this is not gonna. I don't know how this is gonna make me look, but I put the Barbie movie up initially, and that is such a color spectrum, and it just kind of blew me away. I was like, okay, too much. I need to back up a little bit here. This is very vibrant. So I know what you mean. Like it right out of the box. I guess the throw distance, though, you're dealing with that sort of shorter distance to the screen. So you're setting up how far back when you're testing this.
So in my case, I have a 130-inch scope screen. That is the actual size of my screen. Because I know like people will read the review and they're like, "You're using a 100-inch screen. Stop using a 100-inch screen." Well, with these projectors, depending on what they are and how much zoom and whatnot I do zoom them out to fill the full scope width with like a 240 or 235 movie. But
Mm-hmm.
generally, with lifestyle projectors like this, I just shoot them from the image height. So that's going to equate to a 100-inch screen.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, with those type of projectors, they normally don't have a optical zoom. Um, so you can be anywhere between maybe 7 to 8 feet, maybe upwards to 10, maybe 12.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of pushing it, 12, but maybe. Um, so I do it at both ends, but usually when I set it up and I'm doing the initial testing to start, I do everything with the minimum throw. So I'm as close as I could possibly be.
Mm-hmm. This one does have an optical zoom, so you're able to make adjustments, which is
Right.
not typically. It's not that highly widely available for this kind of class of projector, right? Or price
Yeah,
point.
I want to say I can maybe count. There might be more. I'm sure there's more, but at least to my memory right now, I would say I can maybe think about 4 or 5 that have an optical zoom. And there is a lot of lifestyle projectors. So four or
Yeah,
five isn't a lot.
right. That's a small percentage.
Right.
Um, I also noticed there was some auto setup kind of features that were to me kind of in my way. I wanted to just do manual adjustments, but did you experience that a little bit too in your process, just to see what that was like for your average customer?
Um, yeah, I do. I usually run through it. And usually what happens is it'll let you run through it and then it'll take you to the next step. And then I back out and reset it and then move on to
Yeah,
the next step and just kind of
right.
keep going. But it's pretty quick.
Yeah.
It's pretty fast in how it works, and it's like a screen detection and whatnot. Um, but usually I always try to make sure they are set up as best as possible. So usually by the time I'm done setting it up, um, none of the automatic keystoning or any of that stuff even kicks on, even if I have it on, because I make sure that it is level. It's like a constant image height. Like
Mm-hmm.
I make sure that it's like right. Um, but the auto stuff is good. I would say that the autofocus wasn't bad. I did have to touch it up manually. Um, and that was probably my only other, well, not my only other, but that's one of the things I noticed is the focus and the zoom. They are a little too coarse for
Mm-hmm.
my liking. I prefer that they were um, more granular so I can get like a finer adjustment. But overall, they were, everything was fine.
Now you go through the presets to see what the different levels look like, and I know in a lot of reviews we're talking about getting to that brightness number, and a lot of times there's that highest setting that's just not a usable setting just to get to a spec. Maybe
Right.
um, was that the case here? I felt like maybe not as much of a complaint, but you did get that green bias in there with the brightest setting.
Yeah. So generally, they manufacturers that make these will do it a few different ways. It will either be in the picture mode itself, or it might be a feature that you turn on, whether it might be some type of boost mode or brightness enhancer or ultra brightness enhancer or whatever they want to call it. Usually, what those do, and it varies greatly per manufacturer, but when you turn those on, what happens is it starts to pump a bunch. Usually it's a bunch of green because green is a natural luminant, so it's going to make everything brighter. Um, and if it's not green, then it's blue. But it's always going to be one of those two colors, but usually it's green. Um, it'll kick that on, it becomes super green, and it will reach spec or exceed spec. Um, Usually, what happens is the fans kick up as well. It becomes significant, like significantly louder.
Right.
And depending on the manufacturer, we have found that some will kick up a second time. So, how it works is when we measure something like brightness, we can I send a signal to it, like a full white screen, and I would send it like 255 in terms of like peak white. And what happens is it will um, idle for a second. It'll get super bright, super loud. And then what some manufacturers do is after about 30 seconds, it kicks up again. And then that measures much higher than someone else, usually around the same amount of time it would take to start doing measurements for ANSI. And if you ever hear it like do a step with a projector in a mode like that, then that second step is not its real brightness because it can only hit that level of brightness after a certain amount of time has passed while in that mode. Um, so in those cases, we have to adjust it by changing the signal and how we take the measurements. But
So
generally, those
you
modes are not usable.
your experience with this projector though was that it was a brightness enhancer setting that
Right.
got to that level, and but you decided to measure the brightest picture mode, which was standard without the brightness enhancer, and you got 2503 ANSI lumens, which is a little bit below the published standard, but still pretty good, right?
Right. So you have the ISO 21118 specification,
Mm-hmm.
which grants like a manufacturer basically like a 20% tolerance where they can be under whatever their published specification is. Um, so they just standard was within uh, that leeway that's given. It was like 16% or 17%.
17, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're within that. No worries there. Um, and then you talk about the 0.47 inch DMD DLP chipset, which is from what's in this. And you always, I've noticed in the short time we've been working together, I've been editing your reviews, that you are susceptible to the rainbow effect of the color wheel, I guess. So you saw a little bit of that, but not terribly bad in this projector.
Yeah, some people don't see rainbow effect, which is great. Like I generally never really see it with like a 3-chip DLP. For instance, a single chip DLP, a chance that I'll see it. Part of the problem is I know what I'm looking for, so it's easy to find. So like there's certain things that you can always show that will cause a rainbow effect. Even people that, this may not be true for everyone, but for the few people that I've had try it, even though they say like, oh, I can't see rainbow effects, I'll tell them, okay, try this, this, or this. And usually one of them, they will see it. So for instance, if you watch Gravity, usually you see rainbow effects on something that is bright, like a highlight, against something that has a darker background. So at the beginning of Gravity, the spaceship is coming into the frame over space. So it's just white on top of black. And if you look at the ship, you're either going to see like a little kind of rainbow that's on either the front or the back, usually the front of the ship. Another thing could be a candle, like a flame and like a dark background. If like the things are panning, you might see it. But if it's not panning and you don't see it, you can just kind of cut your eyes across the screen and maybe see it. You can see it on things like subtitles. One way to almost 100% see it, if you wanted to, would be if you take a vertical line from top to bottom. This is either like a single pixel line or it could be several, and just have it scroll from left to right. You will probably see a rainbow. Like if you didn't know what rainbows look like and you do that, you would probably see it, and then you would know what they look like. So I just put on things that I know will cause them, and then I look to see if I see it. But then there's times where I'm watching something that I don't really think it's going to be present, and sometimes it is, and that's what's usually more surprising. So I think I was watching, I'm not sure if it was in this review or a different one I did. I was watching Fallout, the Amazon show, and I saw rainbow effects on the lights when some people were in the vault when the camera was panning. And I just kind of moved my eyes across the screen because the contrast is not super great there, or like it's not huge. So I didn't think I would see it, but I did. But I am somewhat susceptible to it, yeah.
Well, the other element of this projector that you mentioned that seemed fairly unique is the enhanced black level. So this is an attempt to make contrast ratios better. What was unique about that experience? How did you think it worked for this projector?
So it's unique that it's even in a lifestyle projector. Like just for the fact that they included it, that's huge in itself. And it's not something that you like never find in projectors. But it's rare to find it in like even some higher end DLPs. So it works. It does what it says it's going to do, and it works very well. I think that it needs more refinement. But in terms of what they just initially put out, it is good, and it does as advertised. Like you do get a nice like sequential like on off contrast from that. Like your black level definitely is much better. The biggest issue that I found with it is that there is a color shift. Some people may or may not see it. Some people may not see it because, like, for instance, if you are red-green colorblind, you probably won't never notice it. You'll probably never even know that it existed. But if you're not, chances are you will probably see it. And its severity is somewhat dependent on how you have it set up, right? But it's always there. And it's one of those things, again, like once you see it, you can't unsee it. So like I already know what I'm looking for at that point. Um, it's visible to the eye and it's measurable. And it can be pretty strong. So it's always going to either shift, at least in my experience, either red or green. And you can even measure it. So like you can put up a full white screen without EBL on and you can measure it and it will be stable with like a razor sharp, super tight white balance. You go to like black, put it back to white, measure it, it'll be the same. Turn EBL on, do it again, you're going to have either a spike in green or a spike in red. And then if you do it again, that spike's going to change. Like green can lower and red can raise, or green can spike up more, or green can drop and then red will spike. So it's pretty noticeable. That's the biggest fault that I found with it.
You did mention the dynamic tone mapping being a welcome feature. What was your experience with that?
The dynamic tone mapping is good. I think that some of the clipping that I saw was, well, when it was just sent 10,000 nits, it didn't do great per se. Like it was more clipping than I was expecting it to have. But when you went to lower nit content, there would still be some clipping, which was also surprising. But when you turn off something like the enhanced black level, you didn't really experience that, at least in the lower nit stuff. In the higher nit stuff, you still, at least I experienced clipping still. But the dynamic tone mapping itself is actually pretty good. Where most lifestyle projectors, their tone mapping is based on a slider like scale where it's like, oh, let me put it at -2, -1, 0, 1, or 2. Because all tone mapping is compression, and then you're just telling it how much compression you want when you're using something like that. Where this is just, you just play your content and let it handle it itself.
Well, just to kind of wrap up here, I think we've covered a lot of the content that you covered in your review. Audio performance pretty good. Not that it would always be dependent on, but it's an option for folks who don't have an audio system to connect to.
Right.
Any other thoughts before we wrap up in terms of your experience with the Valerion projector and what you liked overall, and maybe beyond the refinements to the focus adjustments and maybe the back of the projector having to be open, that type of stuff, the negatives. Any final thoughts there?
I think it is a really good projector. It puts itself in an interesting position because it has the ability to be pretty accurate. I have seen other projectors that are, say, more accurate in 709, but none, at least for lifestyle projectors in that class, but none that are this accurate for 2020. So that's great. That's a super strong point it has going for it. It's snappy. The gaming performance was a surprise because it performed just as well, if not better, than some actual dedicated gaming projectors. It really is a feature-rich projector. It excels in some areas that even higher-end projectors can do better in, but at the same time, there's always a trade-off, and those other projectors that are higher-end projectors excel handily in other areas as well. But I think it's a good option for a lot of people that if they were like on the fence of a projector, this is a good one to try. I mean, at least something that people should at least look at and consider. I don't think it's like the best thing ever, because most projectors, honestly, nowadays are pretty good. Like, it's hard to find a bad projector. So if someone got one, I'm sure that no one would really be disappointed with it.
It definitely has a lot of fans out there. I think the aesthetics have a big piece of that because it just looks so unique. But it also, it's $3,000. It's a little bit more expensive than a flat panel TV, but you can get your screen size where you might want a 100-inch image, but not be able to fit a flat panel into a space. So it's always that sort of like performance cost benefit analysis thing, and what's your application. I guess if your ambient light situation isn't as big of a factor with the brightness that we have here, would you say that you could have some lights on it?
You would probably still want like an AOR or a CLR screen. Like if you had a white screen and light was shining directly on it, that would probably still be a problem. It would definitely hurt contrast and whatnot, but it's bright enough that you can do 130, 140-inch screen and still get sufficient brightness. The only real limiting factor, and this is not just for the Valerion, but for all lifestyle projectors, is placement requirement. It has such a short throw. So like for me, it basically needs to be in my seat. And if I were to ceiling mount it, well, there's a light like right there. And it just has a very specific installation requirement, whether it's ceiling mounted or tabletop. So as long as someone can accommodate that, it's a viable option.
Well, Sammy, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you walking us through this, and you're a very measured reviewer. You literally measure things really well, but you take your time with it and you do it without a lot of hype, and you get really to the point. So I think it's a very welcome. The comments already coming in for the article are very complimentary of just thank you for giving us like options for calibration, telling us what you calibrated, not kind of just doing it and then reviewing it. So I think that it's worth a read to get into the details and the weeds. We just scratched the surface here in this conversation, but great getting to know you better. So thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you. And I know like some people might want to see comparisons of this type of thing. There's actually an event. So I'm in Colorado, and there's an event on April 5th and 6th, where this is going to be compared with a bunch of other projectors that we reviewed here. So the Valerion will be there, the NZ900 will be there, the NZ500 will be there, the Sony Bravia 9, the QB1000, and we have reviews for all of those, and this will be in a comparison with them, as well as the QL7000 is going to be there as well, which is another very cool projector that people should probably take time to see.
Well, great. After we get off our conversation here, I'll get some information from you and make sure we include that in our show notes for this podcast. So thanks for that info. Based in Colorado Springs, Sammie Prescott is a QA software engineer, ISF Level III, professional calibrator and frequent projector and screens reviewer at Projector Central, where you can read not only his most recent review of the Valerion VisionMaster Pro 2, but also his take on the Samsung Premier 9, the Gemco 91S, and much, much more. And that wraps up today's show, which was produced by Projector Central with technical assistance from Pretty Easy Podcasts. Please subscribe to Projector Podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Also, check out all the latest projector product news and reviews at ProjectorCentral.com, where you can also subscribe to receive the links to our latest articles on the day that they are posted. For Sammie Prescott and Projector Central, I'm Jeremy Glowacki. Thanks for listening.